Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Cassie Carroll. I am an assistant director at the Energy Sense Resilience Center. I'm joined today by my colleague Sean Maurer, who's our technical director at the Energy Sense Resilience Center. And we're bringing you this webinar in partnership with the Village of Oak Park and Climate Ready Oak Park. Um, we're going to be talking today about shared momentum, turning efficiency insights into building value. So Energy Sense Resilience Center is a part of the Illinois Innovation Network, the Office of the Vice President of Economic Development and Innovation at the University of Illinois System. Our mission is to empower organizations with practical solutions for climate, energy, and sustainability, and we serve a lot of different types of organizations. One of the main things that we do is focus on energy efficiency in buildings, and that's what we're here to talk about today. We're talking about not only key planning for energy efficiency in buildings, but how can you, as a building owner, building manager, use building data to help make decisions to improve the efficiency of your facilities? So, our presentation today, we'll talk about that key planning. We'll talk about applying this planning to assessment findings. We'll talk about best practices for collaboration with tenants and building owners. And then we'll talk about some other resiliency opportunities, such as electric vehicles, renewable energy, waste management, and water reduction that help make buildings more resilient overall and build not only tenant engagement opportunities, but also help build more attractiveness and better management of the building's value and investment in that building value over time. So I'm going to first talk about what are the key steps for planning. Now, you might have seen this before, but in the first session, we talk about making a commitment, assessing performance, and how to set goals. We're going to talk a little bit about what do you do after you have an assessment? How do you set those goals? How do you create that action plan? What are some key best practices to really move that assessment to action? And then how do you evaluate progress and always make sure to recognize achievements? These two guides at the or resources at the bottom are really great help for not only building owners, but local governments or anybody that manages buildings. So there's the US EPA Energy Efficiency and Local Governments and Operations document, but the DOE Energy Audits and Building Upgrades document has some really great action plans, steps to help move energy efficiency projects forward and how to really follow this map of evaluating progress, recognizing achievements, and doing it all over again for the next initiative. So, again, in our first session, we talked about key planning steps, but really making a commitment is the first step. Whether it's reducing emissions, reducing gas bills, increasing building resilience, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve, say, with an assessment or with an energy efficiency project? Then, after you make that commitment, and you can even build that commitment with your stakeholder team, but you want to get a stakeholder team together that will support this commitment. So it could be the building owner, the building manager, could be tenants. You want to build a robust stakeholder team, and it could be outside experts or consultants to help really build that commitment and help navigate the process of implementing an energy efficiency project or initiative. Then once you make that commitment and say, these are our goals that we're trying to work towards, then you reach out to assess your infrastructure. There's a lot of really wonderful assessment opportunities available in the state of Illinois. The utilities provide really great assessments. You can work with consultants. There's a lot of stakeholders and partners that you can utilize to assess your infrastructure, but assessing your infrastructure, you don't know what to change until you assess, right? Almost like you don't know how much energy you use until you set a baseline and start to benchmark your energy use and see how you're performing against other buildings within your sector. So assessing infrastructure, benchmarking you to utility data, it's telling you the story about what are the opportunities in your building that you can change or improve in your facility. And then you want to set goals and create an action plan. So after you do that assessment, you find out, well, how much energy am I using? What are the available opportunities in my facility? Then you want to set those goals and create an action plan. And that's what we're going to talk about today is reviewing those assessment results. How do those benefits align with your original commitment? And how do you select initial priorities and secure incentives or funding to help you accomplish those projects? So we're going to kind of talk about it in different stages. wins today? How do you set those things that are maybe short-term wins versus more long-term projects? So we're going to talk about, setting goals in different phases. You might want to think about first doing operations and maintenance sorts of work. So optimizing thermostat set points, scheduling your HVAC units, things that are low to low cost. What can you do that are actionable to save energy now that if you waited, you'd be wasting energy and money? So operations and maintenance is always a good place to start. And then looking at those lower cost options such as lighting upgrades or even, equipment upgrades can be low to mid cost, and then investing in something like HVAC measures. So once you get your action plan, you don't have to do everything at once in your assessment. Try to really explore that staged approach to help you implement the easy things, those easy wins, and then work in those long-term projects over time. Sean will be talking about that here momentarily. After you've kind of set that plan, you start implementing. A couple of things that I wanted to mention were really make sure that you develop a tracking system to report your successes and perform regular updates or reviews. How are things performing? How did this project work? Did it actually save the energy that you were hoping? So if you don't track, you don't know how those projects that you're implementing are performing. So implementing, evaluating progress is really important. What's working well, what needs to change, and communicating throughout your stakeholder group as you implement, as you evaluate progress, is really important to the success of the project and forward momentum for your energy efficiency opportunities in the future. And then, of course, once you do complete a project, an energy project, you want to celebrate. Amplify those wins within the building. Share it with your community. Share it with those stakeholders because they're going to give you more buy-in to say, I really thought that project was great. Let's keep doing more. Or I want to keep working with with you to do more work in my space or in the building overall. Recognizing individuals that contributed to project successes are really critical to make sure that you can maintain the buy-in as you continue to move projects forward, and then share those next steps. What are you thinking about next? You've completed, say, a lighting project. What's the next project that you're looking at, or what's the next initiative? And again, aligning it with those goals and that overarching, here's the direction we're going, and here's how we're going to get here, and let's celebrate along the way will help maintain momentum for your energy projects in your building, in your tenant spaces over time. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean now to talk about short-term and long-term project implementation steps. Sean?
All right, thank you, Cassie. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the next section here. So as we're looking at projects, it can kind of broadly be broken out into short-term projects that have quick turnarounds and quick paybacks, and longer-term projects that take a little more planning. Maybe you're going to want to invest more in finding grants and incentives to build those projects up. Um, but what are some kind of short-term project implementation steps? You got a building assessment that's going to have some details in it on things that can be done quickly and easily without a lot of upfront capital cost. Um, Things like changing set points on a thermostat, or if you have a building automation system, updating those set points, small lighting improvements like swapping out individual bulbs for LEDs. Um, those things can be planned for in an operating budget. They don't require a capital budget to do. They're generally low cost, a few $100s or so. Um, and they are often supported by utility rebates to help bring those costs down. Generally, for these short-term projects, you're not looking at multiple grant funds. These are kind of really quick to implement, and 1 to 2 years from conception to implementation of the project, sometimes shorter depending on the type of project. Um, this kind of short-term planning can also apply if you have an emergency situation come up. Um, but you want to be really careful in emergency situations, especially around HVAC and domestic hot water. You want to make sure that those systems are right-sized as part of that replacement project. Um, and so we'll kind of touch on right sizing in a little bit. Um, but for short-term projects, usually in most cases, these are quick payback, doesn't take a lot of planning to implement them. They can be part of the normal building operations and maintenance budget. Specifically to energy efficiency, you want to build those into a line item in that operations budget, and then just tackle those things over time and start bankrolling those savings towards larger projects. Next. Just an example of a short-term project, a simple LED lighting upgrade. Um, Go through a space, identify the amount of lighting that needs to be upgraded and can be supported by your maintenance budget. Um, Factor in utility rebates. Those can expand the amount of lighting that your budget can support. And a lot of the utility rebates will almost entirely fund the entire lighting project, um, particularly through utilities like ComEd and Ameren. One thing to point out is that those incentives are going away at the end of this year and will be phased out. So if you haven't done LED lighting upgrade improvements yet, um, make sure to get those in. Um, but then look for approved vendors through utility programs. Um, the vendors will know how to apply for incentives and apply those to your project. Um, and so that simplifies the application process, all the paperwork, to make sure that you're getting the most installed at the lowest cost. Um, Once you've identified that vendor, um, then installing those LEDs is the final step of that project process. Looking at our long-term replacement projects, these are ones that are going to take a little bit more planning, coordination ahead of time. These are going to be focused on large capital-intensive projects like HVAC replacement, structural repairs, um, adding solar panels to a building, things like that. But you're going to want to start integrating these into a long-term capital budget early. Um, Identify grants that could apply to those projects. Even if you're not applying for the grant right now, knowing what's available and being prepared to apply for those early will help speed that process along and make sure you don't miss deadlines, things like that. Develop your project scope early. Um, Ask vendors for information about commonly overlooked items, things of concern that they see on projects to make sure that as you're building out your plan, you're accounting for um, any conditions that might come up or that contractors see are frequently missed. Um, and then, once you've got that early scope, some of those discussions can reflect new technologies that are more efficient, can cover right sizing of equipment, particularly when we're looking at HVAC and domestic hot water. Um, for electrical systems, sizing of transformers or panel boxes, any potential upgrades, and making sure that some of these contingencies that might pop up are covered by the scope of work. Once you've got something that you're comfortable with, feel you've covered all your bases, and then it's time to go out and get quotes from vendors and get actual pricing for the project, update your capital budgets. Um, Try to, as much as possible, align timelines for installing projects with available grants. Make sure that you're not starting a project right as a grant is ending. Um, Try to, if a grant has an annual cycle, start your project at the start of that grant cycle so that you can apply for it and apply it to your project. Um, as you're pulling those quotes together, be looking at your vendor list and um, identifying which ones apply to the project you want to implement. If you're doing an HVAC upgrade, look for approved vendors through utility programs, ones that have certifications that support, your goals and objectives. If you're trying to electrify or just install more efficient equipment or reduce greenhouse gas emissions, things like that. Utility companies have great lists of approved vendors that know on top of ensuring that they know how to implement energy efficiency projects, also are connected and coordinate well with their rebate programs. So again, you can stack incentives to help pay for these projects. And then you need to select your vendor and implement the project. We see implementation for these may take multiple years, 5 to 6 years to go from we've decided we're going to implement this project, planning it out, and then actually installing it. So these take a little bit of time. For grants, as you're doing some investigation in this, keep references to cyclic grants in an accessible location so that you can keep track of those. Some grants come out every year, every couple of years. Knowing that grant cycle and when to apply can help stack that funding. Monitor sites that support projects for new grant opportunities. So if you're installing HVAC systems, look for there are some Department of Energy sites and state sites that support certain types of electrified systems or heat pumps and things like that. Um, that will post periodic grants. So you want to monitor those. Um, and again, just really try to align your project timeline with those grant windows so that you're starting the implementation of your project when you can apply for that grant and have those funds available to pay for the project. And you don't, um, in your planning process, go past that grant application window and now those funds don't apply. On to our next slide. So an example of a long-term project looking at chiller replacement. So first is the planning phase. You've got a chiller that's 15-ish years old or so. Typically, those have a life of 20 to 25 years. It's time to start planning for replacement just in case there's a catastrophic failure of that system or um, there's significant enough degradation of performance that trying to repair it isn't going to get it back to where it's supposed to be. So it's a good option to look at replacing that. Determine your budget and integrate that into a capital plan. So this is where you're going to want to get some initial vendor quotes. These can be pretty high level based on the existing size of the equipment. At this particular step, right sizing isn't as much of a concern. You're just getting an overall price. That way you know how many grants to apply for, things like that. What price impact different efficiency levels of equipment have. Um, so you can start building your budget and what's going to go into the scope of work for the project. Investigate the options for your improvement. So you could go for with a chiller, you could replace with an air to water heat pump system and get heating and cooling from the same piece of equipment, or it could just be a more efficient chiller so that you can put in a smaller unit. Um, Energy assessments here can really help in narrowing down the best option for you, what's going to have the best payback and best economics. Um, and this is where you can really tap into consultants through either the utilities with their assessment programs or engineering firms. They can all help with kind of this life cycle costing and planning for new equipment. Investigate utility rebates, tax incentives, and grants that are available. Know ahead of time which of those things apply to your project so that you know what to apply for, what the timelines are for those application windows. Chiller technologies have advanced quite a bit. Some can recover heat for use in domestic hot water reheat systems. Some can be used as heat pumps to offset some of your natural gas use. And there's pros and cons to each of these types of systems. So doing some early planning, working with your vendors, aligning the technology you're choosing with the goals for your project is very important and is all part of this initial planning phase to the system selection. On to our next slide. This is kind of in the purchasing phase. So you've refined your scope of work. You've got a good idea of what it's going to cost. You've got potential grants that you can apply for. Now is when you're going to start refining that initial scope with your vendor. So you're going to select a few of your choice vendors that have given you the most help or have been very beneficial to this planning process step. And this is where you really want to make sure that they are doing right sizing of the equipment and not just replacing it for the same size piece of equipment that was there. Loads change over time in buildings. So particularly with cooling equipment, if it's oversized, you're going to have humidity control problems or equipment performance problems as that system cycles on and off if it's oversized for the building. So right sizing should be in the scope. If it's not a line item in the scope of work for the project, it should be added. Um, Ensure that the vendor scope aligns with your facility plans. Does this thing, the equipment they're specifying interlink with your building controls? Are there other upgrade projects you're doing that this needs to coordinate with? Um, is it downsized appropriately to account for other efficiency improvements that have done as part of your short-term projects? Um, Other things like that. Um, Work with your vendor and agencies to complete grant applications. Again, this is one where some of the approved vendors with utilities can help directly with applying for rebates and incentives through the utility. A lot of times they're also going to be familiar with grant opportunities. If you've worked with an engineering firm to do these upgrades, they're also going to be aware of, tax investment credits and state incentives and things like that. Um, Usually you can work with those vendors to draw up those grant applications and get them turned in. Um, and then you're signing that installation contract. That equipment is now locked in size. Um, you're pretty much price locked into what you're going to be paying for. Um, Anything after kind of this step eight becomes a change order that's going to add cost to the project. So at this point, this is where all that prior planning is going to help minimize any future costs on the project because you've tried to account for right sizing of the equipment, any other upgrades or things that are linked with the project. And then you install that chiller, commission it, and as Cassie mentioned earlier, now is when you start tracking. If you're not already, it's a brand new piece of equipment. It's going to be in its most optimal operating condition. Um, Look at your utility bills with a benchmarking program and see what's happening over time um, with that piece of equipment. So you can see, is it actually saving you money? Um, is there work that needs to be done? Things like that. But that's where tracking and ongoing maintenance is very important. On to our next slide. Plan for smart replacements. I can't stress right sizing enough. Avoid operating inefficiencies like short cycling that are going to degrade the life of the equipment, going to cause comfort problems within the building. It's going to reduce your upfront capital cost if you can reduce the size of equipment because you've reduced other loads in the building. That applies to HVAC equipment, domestic hot water, and electrical systems. Plan for efficiency. Um, Try to integrate any new equipment into existing building automation systems if you can, or ensure that they have automation capability as part of their installation, such as smart thermostats, digital timers for lighting, and other equipment. Internet of Thing devices, such as, again, smart thermostats for electrical panels. You can do load shedding technologies that can help you avoid panel upgrades by turning off unnecessary pieces of equipment to run more prioritized pieces of equipment or circuits in a system. Um, Add controls for lighting and plug-in equipment such as occupancy sensors, daylight sensors, time clocks, things like that. Seal up your envelope for low-cost energy savings. Usually, really quick, easy project is to do some weather stripping around doors. Those things tend to wear out after a couple of years and need replaced. Windows, gaps and cracks in the buildings. Um, those can usually be found just by pulling your staff if there's comfort issues in the building. Is there a corner office that's really cold or really hot? Things like that. Um, that's how you can identify those. An energy assessment is also a great way to find those things and document exactly what the problem is. Higher efficiency HVAC and water heating is often incentivized. So don't just replace with the cheapest piece of equipment you can find. Look at those more efficient opportunities like heat pumps, more efficient chillers, things like that. Um, when you stack the incentives that are available through utilities and through tax incentives and things like that, um, you can oftentimes get comparable pricing for a more efficient piece of equipment to a standard piece of equipment. And then you're also going to benefit from long-term operational savings that are built into those pieces of equipment. And those can add up over the entire life of the equipment to more than your initial purchase price. So very important to keep efficiency as one of the factors in your smart replacement plan. Some available funding and financing support. The Illinois Finance Authority's Illinois Climate Bank has an energy efficiency revolving loan fund. This provides a bridge loan to cover gaps until disbursement of federal or state incentives. So these are um, typically 18 to 24 months, up to $1 million. There is also a co-lending program that support longer term project financing. With co-lending programs, those can be up to 7 years um, financing window. And interest rates are those are pretty competitive at 3 to 6%. As far as some other available funding and financing support, energy service contracts through energy service companies can provide financing support for some of your larger upfront capital costs, such as HVAC replacement or whole building automation system replacements or upgrades. Um, they can also bundle a large number of small projects um, with those higher cost projects. So you can do kind of like a whole building deep energy retrofit. And the way these work is all that capital cost is paid upfront by the energy service company, and then you pay them back with the energy savings on your project. Um, these contracts guarantee a certain amount of savings depending on what measures they've identified. So you know you're going to be saving a certain amount each year on the project, and they're going to guarantee it. If it doesn't get achieved, they'll work with the systems to get you to your guaranteed savings. Um, it's a big benefit to these kinds of projects. And because they work over time to achieve a guaranteed level of savings through commissioning, through monitoring of the systems, it provides a window for you to get familiar with those systems as well, and know how they work. And then you can maintain those savings once the contract is completed then, because you'll have some interactions with vendors and things that are supporting this service contract, um, that will then kind of extend beyond the life of that contract into ongoing operations and maintenance long term. So on to our next section. This is going a little bit into how to increase building resilience through renewables, more efficient technologies, things like that. Options for renewables at building sites. Wind is a highly visible renewable. You can install turbines on the edge of a building, try to capture some edge effects of wind blowing up over a roof edge. Um, there are uh, tall tower horizontal wind turbines that you typically see out in fields. Sometimes you see them next to businesses that have the area for it around like a parking space or some green space around the building. But there are also shorter vertical turbines, kind of like what's in the top right-hand picture here, that are trying to capture air blowing over the edges of buildings and around building frames. Um, and these can provide a way to offset some of the electric loads in your building. Solar is a much more popular and common renewable energy option. You can mount solar panels on the roof or on the ground or as parking shading devices if you have a large parking lot. Can be very beneficial for clients and employees of a building to have a shaded area to park their cars. Um, it's a very visible renewable as well, or it can be hidden away if you've got like a high rooftop, something like that. So when you're looking at renewable energies and the type of systems you want to apply, there's a couple of different considerations. One is, um, do you want it to be a highly visible thing that the public can see? Is it something you're going to advertise on a website? Or is it something that you're trying to maintain the aesthetics of your site and you don't want it to be so visible directly, but you want to inform people about it in another way? um, Solar is much more popular in urban areas. Um, just because there's limited land use, but there's a lot of flat rooftop. So solar is typically a little more popular for that reason. It's also a little less maintenance intensive than wind turbines, and so a little bit more popularity there for that reason. Um, it's also much more supported with incentives and financing. Illinois Shines and Illinois Solar for All support solar with resources for implementation, approved vendors, things like that. And they also provide funding opportunities by selling off the renewable energy credits that are generated from your solar um, through their REX program to incentivize kind of the upfront cost, reduce that upfront cost of installing solar. Some additional incentives. We covered a little bit earlier the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund through the Illinois Climate Bank, which is a bridge fund. Um, You do have to have an energy assessment to qualify for that fund within the past 5 years. ComEd's distributed generation rebates also incentivize wind and solar energy. Um, you do have to be on an hourly or some kind of time of day rate structure through ComEd to qualify for those rebates, but they can be quite significant. For commercial systems over 100 kilowatts, you can get a $250 per kilowatt of capacity. And if you're doing battery storage with that, another $250 per kilowatt hour of storage connected with smart inverters. There are also federal clean energy, clean electricity investment credits. So these are starting in December of 2024 and will end either in 2032 or when the U.S. electric grid hits 25% of its 2022 emissions. Um, this is a little bit of a replacement for the um, investment tax credits that were available for solar and geothermal. This covers much more technologies. Um, so not just renewable energy, but other clean electricity options as well. It's got a baseline 6% tax credit for clean electricity that can be increased by up to 5 times for meeting prevailing wage requirements. There's also a 10% increase for domestic content criteria, meeting the Build America, Buy America criteria, and 10% for location in an energy justice community. So there are some funding opportunities for renewables. I believe Cassie is going to touch base now with you on some options for EVs.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And I think a big thing to think about here is we're seeing energy prices continue to rise. So renewable energy is a great option to increase not only the resilience of your building, but also help pay for energy in those common spaces and give tenants an opportunity to lock in lower prices for electricity. So thanks for covering that, Sean, and thanks for covering all of those different project types and different project options. Electric vehicles, there's also a lot of really great opportunities for tenants and businesses to take advantage of electric vehicles. I think the one thing that we're all aware of EVs. How they work, and that EV charging is something that building owners should really think about. But what I wanted to share here is that a electric vehicle can almost be a battery for additional power storage for a building. So you can see here there's inverters that either can put electricity from the vehicle batteries into a house or a space, or they can also, of course, have that power charging as well. So when we're talking about resilience, if building power goes out or if power isn't available, EVs could actually be a battery backup, which is, I think, really interesting. I wanted to share that with you. But electric vehicles have a lot of different resources and funding available. So there are not only incentives for electric vehicles themselves, but also for charging programs. So I'm going to talk about pretty much like EV programs. So for residents, Illinois EPA has an electric vehicle rebate program. It's $4,000 for low income applicants, and $2,000 for for the general public, and $1,500 for an electric motorcycle. So this actually ends here at the end of May. But there's always new rounds and different things coming out if you're viewing this webinar at a different time. For businesses, businesses actually there's Illinois EPA has funding from VW for EV fleets, and you must be in a priority area, and the Chicagoland area is a priority area number 1. So this could qualify for electric trucks and charging infrastructure, and it's available on a rolling basis. So until the funds have been used. So we'll make sure that these slides are available and you can click these links to find out more about these programs as well. And then businesses, there is a heavy duty vehicle charging loan program. So for small and medium sized fleets and charging operations, you can get a loan for level 2 and level 3 charging stations as well. There are a lot more programs available for EVs. The utilities have EV charging programs, EV rebates. There are lower rates that businesses can get for EV charging, electricity rates. So there's more resources at this website down here, but adding EVs to your building is something that not only gives residents the option to have an electric vehicle, but it also creates more resilience for your building, more attractiveness for your building, especially for folks that are interested in EVs. So consider EVs as well as a resilience option for your building. We don't, we've been talking a lot about energy, but there's a lot of really great opportunities for water management. Our water resources are finite, they are not infinite. So we really want to think about not only how can we help reduce utility costs for our residents or for our tenants in our buildings, but also help increase efficiency. So the first thing to think about is doing leak detection and assessing your facility for any leaks. Having a leak maintenance program and management program is really important. And one of the things you can do to see if there's leak detection is put meters at different spots in the building and see, then you can really pinpoint where a leak is coming from and why water use may be high in certain areas of the building. Of course, low flow fixtures is always a really great option for tenant spaces, such as faucet aerators, shower heads, toilets, urinals, etc. These are all ways to build in, either as you're doing renovating a space or constructing a new space, you're building in water efficiency from the start. And sometimes utilities can provide no cost equipment. So things like, particularly those things that use hot water. Those are technologies that are also incentivized by the utilities because it takes energy to heat the water, and they want you to use energy efficiently. So I know we're talking about water, but also think about the utilities when you are thinking about ways to save water and reduce hot water use. Energy Star appliances are another great option. So things that are Energy Star certified will use lower amount of energy and usually less water. And then a lot of our buildings have landscaping. So managing your landscaping sprinkler system so you're not watering the sidewalks and your hoses and nozzles are all working properly and are properly being distributed on the landscape is really important. There's technologies such as rain sensors, so you're not watering when it's raining outside and wasting water, or low flow spray heads that it can really help reduce irrigation system water use. And you can also meter your water use separately for your irrigation system than other building use to see exactly how much water is being used and how you can employ different technologies to reduce water use over time. And then, of course, there's tenant education. The EPA Water Sense program is a great place to help tenants learn a little bit more about how to use water more efficiently and effectively and help reduce not only water use, but their water bills as well. So water management is something to increase building resilience and preserve our resources over time. And finally, waste management. We all know we have tenants that want to recycle, that are interested in composting. Making sure that you're managing waste at your building is really critical because it creates cleaner, safer, healthier environments and attracts those eco-conscious tenants that care about waste management. So providing recycling information to tenants is one of the best ways to do that, whether it be at your building or a drop-off center nearby. Making sure that your residents know or your tenants know what is recyclable and what's not reduces contamination rates. And contamination rates, if there's too much contamination that ends up in a recycling bin, then sometimes the customer gets charged and the whole bin has to go to the trash rather than recycling. So providing that recycling information up front to tenants is really important to make sure that they're recycling the proper things, that it isn't contaminated, and so that more things get recycled. And you as a building owner won't get those bills from the recycling company saying, "Hey, we had to scrap this because there's too much contamination." Also, using locked bins, recycling and trash bins can be really important to reduce contamination and to make sure it reduces dumping. So people walking down the alley and dumping something in the bin that isn't supposed to be there. Connection, one of the things, we all have, I know some buildings have a lot of limited alleyway space as well. So being a facilitator to connect businesses and tenants with waste assessment opportunities or opportunities to collaborate on waste bins can really, and cost of waste bins can really increase those diversion rates and make sure that those services are available. So, another good resource though is doing a waste assessment. So particularly for retail operations or food operations in a building, reducing waste at the business source can eliminate excess bins and eliminate waste. So, and costs too. That'll cost you less. That might cost the business less. So, connecting businesses or tenants with waste rate assessment opportunities can help businesses navigate how can I reduce my waste so I don't have have to send as much to the landfill or to the recycling center. So connecting them with not only information, but assessment opportunities can help with waste management in your building. And then also consider offering composting. There in the Chicagoland area, there are so many different systems. So from a 5 gallon bucket for an individual tenant to a large shared dumpster space or a 90 gallon or 66 gallon bin. There's so many different options for composting nowadays. And so there's some good local companies. There's only a couple that I listed here on the slide. There are many more. We're not preferential to one company over another, but there's great local composters and it's really easy. So again, providing your tenants with that information and helping them figure out how to site it at the building can really increase the amount of waste we divert away from the landfill. And again, really meet the needs of those and those interests of those tenants that care about waste reduction and want to do things to really reduce and eliminate emissions and divert waste away from the landfill. So, we've talked a lot about not only today the waste and resilience measures, but we've talked about how to start and plan and implement your energy efficiency projects. We've talked about funding opportunities. We've talked about a lot today, but if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Let us know if you need support. Our email addresses are right here, but you can always check our website at energysense.uillinois.edu for more information. If you go to our website as well, we do have a call center where you can call and ask questions to us directly, but please feel free to reach out. We're here to help. So thank you to not only all of you for watching, but thank you to the Village of Oak Park and Climate Ready Oak Park for sponsoring this session today. Sean, any last words for our attendees or our viewers
Yeah,
today?
I think we've covered it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time. Have a great afternoon, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye bye.
Thanks all.